Boy, the more one watches politicians and their pop media pals, the more a line from a movie reverberates in the expanses of one's mind. Indeed, when witnessing them flip their proverbial wigs over the impeachment acquittal of private citizen Donald Trump, when seeing them not only not question the constitutionality of the action, but also seeing them recklessly sling about the reactionary term insurrection to describe the events at the Capitol on January 6th, one powerfully hears the line from the film The Princess Bride.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Hi everyone, I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRC-TV. Well, we've seen it before. The politicians and their media mouthpieces use terms like bailout when they're really engaging in multi-generational theft and redistribution of wealth. They use the term job creating when engaging in more of that tax thievery and then funneling it into pet projects that they could simply invest into with their own cash, but they don't seem to be doing that, even though they say that they're job creating. And from 2017 through 2020, they used the term peaceful protest when huge swaths of cities had been looted and burned to the ground by rioters.
This is mostly a protest. It is not generally speaking unruly, but fires have been started.
Many of these protests have been largely peaceful.
Mostly peaceful.
Mostly peaceful.
Mostly peaceful.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
And now they keep spouting the term insurrection as they either show their ignorance of the word or intentionally misuse it to prop up a politically useful narrative. Thus, we see MSNBC's Joy Reid and guests as she vented her anger at the Senate acquittal of Donald Trump in the absurd impeachment trial of a non-president. The visibly angry Reid welcomed her enlightened parrot posse to her poorly named Readout program February 13th by saying this.
There were two kinds of Republicans in that chamber today. There were the kinds of Republicans who saw what they saw and heard what they heard and experienced the 1-6 insurrection and voted accordingly.
1-6. Boy, oh boy, what an insult to the people who experienced tragedy on 9/11. Trying to use that sort of shorthand. Just repulsive, unbelievably low. I can't believe they doing stuff like that. It's so sad. Let's pause here to reflect on 3 points. First, there's the brief but notable reiteration of a term that other leftist media and political figures recently have used on a repeating loop. It's the shorthand 1-6 for the chaos at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Something that seems to be a linguistic lever used to liken that tumultuous event to the term 9/11. And to lift it to that level of historical significance, which, if intentional, is a devilish, towering insult to history, to the lives taken on September 11th, 2001, to grieving loved ones, and to the people who sacrificed so much in rescue efforts and attempted to clean up Ground Zero. Second, there's the implication that a correct or virtuous vote is one that corresponds to the true experience of senators there during the infiltration. True experience, of course, being defined by Joy Reid as an insurrection. And third, there's the term insurrection itself, which is the basis for the entire Democrat-led circus. Simply put, not one of the people arrested in the events in D.C. on January 6, 2021 has been charged with insurrection. Period. There was no insurrection, and there was no attempt at an insurrection at the Capitol, and Joy Reid either knows this and is intentionally misleading people, or she is in such a bad state as a journalist that she continues to offer nonsense without realizing it. Either way, Reid continued, claiming that the other portion of the GOP, those who didn't vote against Trump in that trial, were not motivated by evidence or by the Constitution, but by political calculation.
And the kind who are making some sort of political calculation to cling to Donald Trump like he's a life buoy.
In other words, Joy Reid gets to frame the debate and claim that those who didn't conform to her desires to convict Trump in a purely political trial, that they're the ones who are politically calculating. Now, to back up her narrative, Reid flashed the words of Senator Richard Burr, the Republican so-called of North Carolina, who also appears to have traveled to Fantasyland and then not passed the TSA screening in order to return home.
The evidence is compelling that Trump is guilty of inciting an insurrection against a co-equal branch of government and that the charge rises to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors.
It's like they think that they can say anything because they're in these lofty positions. So they just spout nonsense. It's incredible. Which is not only patently contradicted by Trump's own words on January 6th, but also contains an additional fallacy that the branches are, as public school myth tellers claim, co-equal. Only a person with limited faculties could look at the branches and claim this because the legislative branch not only has the vast power to create the federal court system beneath the U.S. Supreme Court, it has the superpower called impeachment. When impeachment is used for purely political purposes to remove someone from office, that's almost its own form of insurrection, like a color revolution. And when a non-political trial in the Senate is conducted for what appears to be an attempt to negate a former president's right to run for office again, that seems close to a bill of attainder, which is prohibited by Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3 of the vaunted U.S. Constitution, and which, as Cornell Law notes, was described by 19th century Supreme Court Justice Joseph Story thus: bills of attainder are such special acts of the legislature as inflict capital punishments upon persons supposed to be guilty of high offenses, such as treason and felony, without any conviction in the ordinary course of judicial proceedings. If an act inflicts a milder degree of punishment than death, it is called a bill of pains and penalties. In such cases, the legislature assumes judiciary magistracy, pronouncing upon the guilt of the party without any of the common forms and guards of trial, and satisfying itself with proofs when such proofs are within its reach, whether they are comfortable to the rules of evidence or not. In short, in all such cases, the legislature exercises the highest power of sovereignty and what may be properly deemed an irresponsible, despotic discretion, being governed solely by what it deems political necessity or expediency, and too often under the influence of unreasonable fears or unfounded suspicions. Hence why they're banned by the Constitution. And as Cornell's Legal Information Institute goes on to note, quote, the phrase bill of attainder as used in this clause and in clause 1 of subsection 10 applies to bills of pains and penalties as well as to the traditional bills of attainder. But for the sake of the hologrammatic unity that the left keeps telling us we must embrace, even as they continue to work to tell us how to live, let's pretend the impeachment trial of a former president actually is constitutional. The idea that there was an insurrection is falsified by the fact that no charges for such have been brought against any of the civilians who entered the Capitol on January 6th. And if one claims that the charges against them aren't really relevant and that Trump actually tried to incite an insurrection regardless of the result, Trump's statements that day explicitly contradict this. As his legal representative, Michael Vanderveen, offered as part of his closing statement at the Senate so-called trial.
At no point in their presentation did you hear the House managers play a single example of Mr. Trump urging anyone to engage in violence of any kind. At no point did you hear anything that could ever possibly be construed as Mr. Trump encouraging or sanctioning an insurrection. Senators, you did not hear those tapes because they do not exist, because the act of incitement never happened. He engaged in no language of incitement whatsoever on January 6th or any other day following the election. No unbiased person honestly reviewing the transcript of Mr. Trump's speech on the ellipse could possibly believe that he was suggesting violence. He explicitly told the crowd that he expected the protest outside the Capitol to be peaceful and patriotic.
Of course, as we know, the term peaceful seems malleable in the eyes of many Congress members, senators, and the pop media, including people like Congresswoman Maxine Waters, the Democrat from California, who explicitly told supporters,
"Let's make sure we show up wherever we have to show up. And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere."
And it includes Nancy Pelosi.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
And it seems to fit all the Democrats in the Senate who voted to remove Trump, as well as 7 Republicans. The Dems needed 17 GOPers on their side to convict, but only 7 were so painstakingly blind to reality that they joined the Democrats. Those are Susan Collins of Maine, Mitt Romney of Utah, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Ben Sasse of Nebraska, Patrick Toomey of Pennsylvania, Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, and the aforementioned Burr. Is it too much to ask that these people bother to understand the facts and the Constitution? Are their salaries, power, and pensions so huge that they can't take a moment to consider how Alice in Wonderland this looks to those of us who do read the document they're supposed to uphold? Joy Reid doesn't seem to care about these politicians' ignorance. In fact, she either shares it or assiduously avoids offering information and shades the definition of words in order to propel her awful, insulting narrative. One need not be a supporter of Trump to see how juvenile and pretentious, how fictional and fantastical this crazy display has been. And one need not pretend that Joy Reid and the senators standing on their soapboxes care in any way for the facts or for the Constitution that's supposed to limit the government they continue to expand. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. As we often note, it is a wild time right now, and it's so great to know that so many people out there are backing up MRC. Really appreciate it. If you get the opportunity and you want to go to the MRC store, it's MRC-store. You can always find us at MRCTV.org, where all the writers are doing great work, and you can see all the videos over on the side. And you can follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, and find our videos on Rumble as well. That's a great new place to go. I'm on Gab at Gardner Goldsmith, and I want to recommend to you, again, if you get the opportunity and you go to MRCTV.org, you read some of the articles, over on the side you might see something new that's going to be coming from the Media Research Center. It's a great new way to get around the old stolid and staid university learning environments in a way that you can gain wisdom. We'll tell you more about that as it comes along. Right now, for MRC TV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.